வணக்கம். Let me at the outset express my thanks to the organizers of this meeting, of this conference, giving me an opportunity to deliver, read my paper on Dravidology, about philosophy of India, based on Tamil literature. I thank them once again. With this, let me proceed with reading my article. Part 1. Abstract. This article traces the roots of Indian philosophy from ancient peninsular India. So far, it is a Sanskrit literature which described Indian thought is being discussed. We attempt here that the roots of Indian thought is in ancient Tamil works. This actually is an introduction to the influence of various Tamil works which deal with materialism. Vedas, Purusha Sukta, Buddha, Sankhya, Enniyam, that is the Tamil word for Sankhya, Upanishads, Gita, and Tirukkural. This is a survey article. Readers are requested to read books dealing with these topics. Among these, Sankhya is the oldest. Introduction. This paper does not discuss any particular topic elaborately. Instead, we discuss many related topics which were hitherto not discussed in the way we discuss here. In that sense, this paper is a survey article on philosophy. So far, the Indian philosophy, also referred to as Indology, concentrated on Sanskrit literature with mostly religious contents. Here, we discuss topics which originated from Tamil Nadu, land of Tamil people, which are materialistic in approach. In the initial stages, materialism was known. Spiritualism was unknown. Man learnt from nature. Spiritualism started with the Yajurveda, dealing with mantras and rituals. Coming to the Tamil land, we make the following observations. Thousands of years back, in writing an introductory remark for the Tamil classic, a first grammar of Tamil, Tolkapiyam, Parambaranar, a scholar, wrote, "The land bounded in the north by the Vindhyas to the land south of Kanyakumari, the peninsular India, spoke the language of Tamil. The recent excavations in Kildi near Madurai, Tamil Nadu, confirms the existence of fully developed writing system for Tamil language in the 6th century before Common Era. Based on these facts, we discuss the writings of Tamil scholars in a chronological order. We don't discuss the dates of the works we deal with in the coming pages. The relative chronology will suffice to our needs. We start our discussion with a now lost book, Enniyam, known as Sankhya Karika by Iswar Krishna in Sanskrit. Sankhya doctrine was earlier to Gautama Buddha. We outline how Gautama Buddha's teachings rely on Sankhya. Next to Buddha, we consider the Upanishads and show how it relies on Sankhya doctrine. Next, we take Bhagavad Gita, which is called an epitome of Upanishads. Finally, we conclude with a discussion on Tirukkural, a Tamil classic. A recognized recent Tamil scholar, Bharatidasan, has asserted that Tirukkural is a work based on Enniyam. We discuss Tirukkural and compare it with Bhagavad Gita. As all topics are linked to Enniyam, we call this discussion as Dravidology. Next topic, Enniyam. The very first verse of Sankhya Karika outlines the scope of the work. The first sutra. The inquiry is into the means of precluding the three sorts of pains. For pain is embarrassment within brackets, nor is the inquiry superfluous because obvious means of alleviation exist bracket ends. For absolute and final relief is not nearby accomplished. That was Sutra 1. This is expressed in Tirukural verse, the meaning of which is, the learned people will not get disturbed by the fact that this life is but a target of pain and sorrow. The view expressed in the portion of the verse in parenthesis is not found in Tirukural quoted here. This part of the verse will lead to Vedic view of moksha. Sutra 3. Nature, the root of all, is no production. 7 principles, the great or intellectual one, etc., are productions and productive. 16 are productions unproductive. Bracket, no, soul is neither production nor productive. Bracket ends. That was Sutra 3. In this sutra, the author of Karika introduces the concept of a soul. It is supposed to be eternal. As per Vedas, it will attain moksha at some stage when all the pains of life ceases. Tamil thinking does not believe in moksha. A study of Tirukural will explain this conclusion. But Tamil classics treats the soul as Uyir, the life force, which has a beginning and an end. Human activities can be explained with the help of just 24 basic principles of nature. Nature is the basis of the origin, universe. It is not created by anything. I repeat the Sutra 3. Nature, the root of all, is no production. 7 principles, the great, the intellectual one, etc., are productions and productive. 16 are productions unproductive. Well, that was Sutra 3. We make further observations on Enniyam as we discuss Tirukural later in this essay. Now, I quote on Saravaka. The Indian philosophy, the name Saravaka means a materialist. The Saravaka holds that perception is the only valid source of knowledge. They point out that all non-perceptual or indirect source of knowledge, like inference, the testimony of other persons, etc., are unreliable and often prove misleading. We should not, therefore, believe in anything except what is immediately known through perception. That was Saravaka. Next topic, some to Buddhism. We quote below the teachings of Gautama Buddha from the book What Buddha Taught by Rahula Walpola. I quote the book. What we call life, as we have so often repeated, is the combination of the 5 aggregates, a combination of physical and mental energy. These are constantly changing. They do not remain the same for 2 consecutive moments. Every moment they are born and they die. When the aggregates arise, decay and die, oh Bhikkhu, every moment you are born, decay and die. Thus, every now, during this lifetime, every moment we are born and die. But we continue. We can understand that in this life we can continue without a permanent, unchanging substance like self or soul. Why can't we understand that those forces themselves can continue without a self or a soul behind them after the non-functioning of the body? This portion of the quote has a parallel in Tirukural 340. I continue. When this physical body is no more capable of functioning, energies do not die with it, but continue to take some other shape or form, which we call another life. In a child, all the physical, mental, and intellectual faculties are tender and weak, but they have within them the potentiality of producing a full grown man, physical and mental energies which constitute the so called being have within themselves the power to take a new form and grow gradually and gather full force to the full. As there is no permanent, unchanging substance, nothing passes from one moment to the next. So, quite obviously, nothing permanent or unchanging can pass or transmigrate from one life to the next. It is a series that continues unbroken but changes every moment. The series is, really speaking, nothing but movement. It is like a flame, burns through the night. It's not the same flame, nor is it another. A child grows up to be a man of 60. Certainly, the man of 60 is not the same as the child 60 years ago, nor is he another person. Similarly, a person who dies here and is reborn elsewhere is neither the same person nor another. It is the continuity of the same series, page 34. With that, the Garbe quote ends. All the above ideas stem from the basic principles of Enniyam. The preachings of Buddha awakened the people. They started to think about the efficacy of Vedic rituals. They understood the rituals were just a way of stealing their money and materials. They stopped going to the Brahmins for sponsoring rituals and get the blessings of the gods. Brahmins lost their livelihood. We go to the next section. The plight of Brahmins. We give quotes from the book Richard Garbe. I cannot regard it as my task here to give a complete list of Brahmins' sin, intended only to cite enough to leave no doubt in the mind of the reader of these pages regarding the way in which the Indian priest cared for the happiness of the people. Page 68. Next I continue. Brahma as God of creations. The creation was divisive. The humankind was divided into 4 divisions. They are Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra and Panchamas, who do not deserve to be classified. Purusha Sukta. Brahmins were the only class to be educated. They lived on performing rituals for others to ward off evil. They got paid in money or in kind, like food grains. About this, Garbe has to say like this. And yet, this is not the climax of priestly greed, which to use a fitting expression of Professor Weber's, indulges in veritable orgies in these texts. When one has worked his way through the endless description of a ceremony, one may read at the close the remark that the whole sacrifice is of no avail unless the fee is paid to the satisfaction of the priests, and lest perchance, to use a modern phrase, the price be forced down by competition, the market beard. It was a rule that no one might accept a fee refused by another. When the non-Aryan subjected aborigines, known as Shudras or servants, without civil or religious rights, had to fulfill the divine purpose of serving the Aryans, especially the Brahmins. The Shudra is the servant of others and may be cast out and killed at pleasure. That is a humane view applied by the Brahmins to the native population. That was Garbe. In the course of time, the rituals were found to be ineffective. At that time, Buddha came. He preached against the unknown gods and the rituals for such gods. People responded in large numbers that Brahmins lost their livelihood. Buddha was a king. The alternative thinking, alternate to Vedas, was with the kings. The Brahmins surrendered to the kings. They discussed and learned with them. Next topic, the Upanishads, surrender of Brahmins. Having lost their livelihood, as outlined above, The Brahmins tried to present an alternative philosophy so that they can get their lost popularity and the respect of the masses. That is the starting point of the Upanishads. Yes, Radhakrishnan, renowned Indian philosopher, has this to say about Vedic philosophy and the commentators of the philosophy. The Upanishad, though in one sense a continuation of the Vedic religion, or in another sense a strong philosophical protest against the religion of the Brahmins. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the oldest of the Upanishads, starts with the comparison of the sacrificial horse to the nature. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, for instance, is composed of 3 divisions, each of which is included as if it were a complete whole by Vamsha or genealogy of the doctrine, that is a list of teachers through whom the doctrine was taught, had originally been received to the Brahma and handed down to the time of writing. The first section, entitled the Honey section, contains a dialogue between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi, which is almost verbally repeated in the second section called Yajnavalkya section. It seems quite evident that these 2 pieces could not have been part of the one continuous writing, but they were parts of those separate works which were mechanically united and connected to the third section, whose title, the supplementary section, is in accordance with the heterogeneous nature of the contents. That was Hume. Then they started discussing water, earth, fire, mind, etc. At the end of the first chapter, we see them saying, 1.6.3, now of works, that which is called body, Atman, is there him of praise, for from it arise all actions. It is the summon, it is the same as all works. It is their prayer, for it supports all works. They have to accept the world to soul stands for the body. They continue the discussion in the second chapter. Not getting a wholesome picture, they go to the king Ajatasattu. Now I quote from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. 2.1.14. Ajatasattu said, "Is that all?" Gargaya said, "That is all." Ajatasattu said, "With that much only, it is not known." Gargaya said, "Let me come to you as a pupil." 2.1.15. Ajatasattu said, "Verily, it is contrary to the course of things that a Brahmin should come to a Kshatriya thinking he will tell me Brahma. However, I shall cause you to know them clearly." 2.3.1. There are assuredly 2 forms of Brahma, the formed Murta and the formless. Now I quote Garbe. With truly startling frankness, the Brahmins put forth their claims in these works. In numerous passages, to begin with the most important feature, they proclaim themselves to be gods, walking the earth in bodily form. There are 2 sorts of gods, they say, the real gods and the learned Brahmins who repeat the Veda. The Brahmins represent all the divinities. Indeed, he is the god of gods, probably any case of its kind where clerical presumption has gone to the point of making such claims. Garbe 59. After this, we can no longer feel surprised that the Brahmins, as terrestrial gods, fancied themselves elevated far more above royalty, nobility. But it might well seem surprising that kings and warriors yielded to the Brahmins the first rank in the state. With this last statement, the discussion is closed, and they declared it is the Upanishads arrived after the discussion by more than 50 generations. Subsequently, not satisfied with the development of ideas, they started again. In the later portions, we find that they dominated the kings and re-established their supremacy. I now quote from the 4th chapter, 4.2.4. But the soul is not this, it is not that, neti neti. It is unceasable, for it cannot be ceased. It is indestructible, for it cannot be destroyed. It is unattached, for it does not attach to itself. It is unbound. Does not tremble. It is not injured. Page 125. Verily, Janaka, you have reached fearlessness. Thus spoke Yajnavalkya. 4.2.4. Janaka, the king of Vijayaka, said, may fearlessness come unto you? Noble sir, you make us feel to know fearlessness, adoration to you. Here are the Vijayas, here am I, as your servants. Then, during Sankara's period, they killed the Buddhists. Brahmins infiltrated into Buddhism and converted Buddha as 10th incarnation of Vishnu. Bhagavad Gita is inspired by Tirukkural.